Hello everyone, my name's Owen Missen. I'm an Australian PhD student working on tellurium, and today I'm going to talk to you about Tellurium Biogeochemistry. I won't keep my video on for the rest of the talk, just because it might cover over important information in the corner of the slide, but you'll see me again later on, and of course during the question sessions. Today I'm going to talk to you about why I'm studying tellurium, why it's an interesting and fascinating element. Then I'll talk about the field site, where there's a lot of elemental tellurium, some results so far, and what's coming next in my studies of this fascinating element. Now, some uses of tellurium. It's a major component of solar panels of the type cadmium telluride. It's classed as a critical metal for this particular usage in places like the United States. Tellurium is also used in a number of alloys, like this one with copper, in some specialized electronics like thermoelectric devices, in some rubber manufacture, and an important point as an antimicrobial agent, which we're going to talk about more later on. Thinking now about tellurium as a contaminant, there's really two ways of releasing tellurium to the environment through anthropogenic activities: its end of life of tellurium containing products, or just releasing tellurium when processing something which contains a lot of it, but it isn't going into the final product. Radioactive tellurium isotopes are also released by nuclear disasters, and these weren't very well understood after the Fukushima disaster, and that made cleanup much harder. So our research focuses on using mining sites as natural examples of contamination, where you can study the processes that naturally occur on a tellurium-rich source and apply this to anthropogenic contamination contexts. Based on the lack of understanding of tellurium biogeochemistry, we recently published a major review on tellurium biogeochemistry in surface environments. If you'd like to know a lot more about tellurium, then I'd certainly encourage you to read through this paper, which I'm more than happy to provide to anyone who's interested. So based on our literature review, we put together tellurium and gold cycling for the first time into one coherent model. I'd like to particularly draw your attention to process number 4, which shows that tellurium can go into the atmosphere as volatile tellurium compounds produced by microbes. Gold doesn't have this sort of behavior, and that's where the two cycles separate after the two metals are normally found together in saprolith samples, such as in gold tellurides. Thinking now about biogeochemical processes, tellurium is really quite a toxic element to many microorganisms. Most microbes have no detoxifying mechanism for tellurium, and it's particularly the soluble anions which are a problem for microorganisms. But some are able to reduce tellurium from the soluble anions down to elemental tellurium, and that's a form of immobilization and a form of bioreduction, producing tellurium nanoparticles. This has been well studied in the lab, hasn't been observed in nature before. Another form of bioreduction is biovolatilization. This is the process I mentioned before, whereby tellurium can go into the atmosphere, producing garlic-smelling compounds that might be detected at a mine producing a lot of tellurium. This time the tellurium is being mobilized in its reduction from tellurium 4+ or 6+ down to tellurium in the -2 oxidation state. Another process which is mobilizing tellurium is an opposite way to what we've been looking at previously, and this is oxidation of tellurium from tellurides. The only method known is indirect oxidation, whereby iron or sulfur oxidizers release iron 3+ to oxidize for tellurium. Unlike for selenium, there are no direct oxidizers known to this point. So some key findings out of this review include identifying missing parts of the tellurium puzzle, such as the lack of tellurium direct oxidizers. No one's found any, but they're probably out there. The key thing though is that there's a lot of studies about tellurium nanoparticles being produced by microbes and environmental isolates at that, but no one's actually found these nanoparticles in the environment before, so are they actually important? And without any data like that, we decided the best place to visit was a mine where elemental tellurium is in high abundance. The field site we chose was Moctezuma, Mexico, where elemental tellurium is the main ore mineral. And nearby there's a more typical epithermal deposit at San Miguel mine, which is ideal for comparison with the very unusual Moctezuma. So the Moctezuma mines are named after the town of Moctezuma, and they're found in Sonora State, Mexico. It's been treated in the past as a gold mine, that was the mined commodity, but really it seems like it's actually a tellurium mine hosting gold because the amount of tellurium enrichment there is quite extraordinary. So why did we pick Moctezuma? Apart from the fact that elemental tellurium is the main ore mineral, there's also a lot of other tellurium minerals found there. Over 20 were found at Moctezuma first, and there's another 20 or 30 which are also found there. If you work there long enough, you can even get the very unpleasant tellurium breath. With all this elemental tellurium around contacting surface waters and atmospheric oxygen, we start having oxidation of the tellurium occurring, and this starts producing tellurites and tellurates, and these can either form secondary minerals, which have a variety of unique structures, or the tellurium in the soluble forms can migrate into the groundwater. Just feature a couple of the tellurium minerals found at Moctezuma, elemental tellurium being the main one, which undergoes weathering, and it produces a variety of amazing oxidation products, including minerals like this, chocolatite, named for its colour and with the Mexican spelling, which is the last tellurium mineral to have been described at Moctezuma to date. And on the right we have emmensite, a very common mineral at Moctezuma, often found growing out of iron oxides. With all this naturally occurring tellurium around, one of our aims was to really study the biogeochemistry of tellurium in great detail, and we now do have the first evidence for natural tellurium nanoparticles, probably reduced by microbes from the oxidized forms of tellurium back to naturally occurring nanoparticles. Here's a preliminary SEM image of these. All the little bright specks you can see, much less than 100 nanometers in size, are in fact elemental tellurium. We found a number of bacteria tolerating over 1,000 parts per million of tellurium for the first time. Not all of these are cycling it. For the case of the Chloroflexi phylum, often 20 to 50% of Chloroflexi in most of the samples from the surface soils at Moctezuma. We're not entirely sure if they're cycling it or just tolerating all the tellurium that's there. We found a number of Geodermatophilus bacteria, and these are well known for their metal resistance. But most exciting for cycling of tellurium was that we found a number of Bacillus species, up to 10% in some samples with ore contacting soil, and these species are well known to produce nanoparticles of tellurium. So we now have better understanding of tellurium cycling, but there's still much to learn. And the previous studies we examined showed that tellurium nanoparticles should be present in the environment, and we now have preliminary evidence of this for the first time. And I'll be studying this more in the final year of my PhD. As with any research project, there are many people to thank, including my supervisors, our overseas collaborators, and a number of organisations for funding my research, to which I am very grateful. Hello again, thanks everyone. I do hope you enjoyed my presentation, and I'm looking forward to answering any questions you might have, or just discussing tellurium in general via the forum or question sessions, or get in contact by email or Twitter. I look forward to interacting with you soon.